Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be making a cozy unisex jumpsuit. And this is an awesome sewing project for all skill levels. You're going to learn how to put an entire body piece together with a zipper, so it's going to improve your skills on all these areas. And I'm going to show you the tips and tricks to really take your sewing projects to that next level. With all that being said, if you're new to the channel, grab that printable pattern and let's get started. Getting started with supplies, you're going to want to grab yourself 4 to 5 yards for your main fabric, and I recommend using fleece, sherpa, or sweatshirt fabric. All these are really nice, warm, comfy fabrics that will work perfect with this pattern. I'm going to be using both sherpa and sweatshirt fabric. I think using 2 different materials really adds to the overall design. You'll need one 22-inch zipper. I'm using a smaller metal zipper, but you can realistically use plastic, metal, or any style zipper you like. You'll need 1 yard of rib net or ribbing fabric, and this is going to be for the arm and leg cuffs. If you're using a fabric that is already nice and stretchy, you don't have to use a rib knit. You can go ahead and use the same fabric you're already using. You'll need 1.5 yards of cord. And this is going to be for the hoodie so you can cinch it together. You'll need 2 eyelets. I'm using a 1/4 inch eyelet out of a kit. And this kit is really nice. It comes with a punch, a die, and multiple styles. So it's easy to pick the best one for my project. You'll also need 1 zipper pull, and this is optional. This is just a nice little detailed touch at the end that's going to really bring out your design. Lastly, you'll need your pattern. This pattern is available at properfitclothing.com. It's super easy to use. All you have to do is print it, cut it out, and you're ready to go. And after printing it out, the best thing to do is cut off the top and the side edges. This will allow you to overlap the pages to make for a perfectly aligned pattern. And once you have all your supplies gathered, it's time to move into cutting.
After printing and taping your pattern together, it should look like this. Patterns are laid out in alphanumerical order, and you can use the guide on the 3rd page to help. And for the best results, be sure to check your printer alignment before printing. After cutting out your pattern, you should end up with 2 arm cuff panels cut out of your rib knit fabric, 2 leg cuff panels cut out of your rib knit fabric, 4 side pocket panels cut out of your main fabric or jersey, 2 chest pocket panels cut out of your main fabric, 2 hood panels cut out of your main fabric, 2 arm panels cut out of your main fabric, 2 back panels cut out of your main fabric, and these are going to be on the longer side. Same goes for the front panel, which you'll need 2 out of your main fabric. Starting with construction, grab your hood panels and we're going to mark the hem guides. This is going to be the housing for our cord, and we're going to mark the eyelet placement at the bottom. Using the eyelet kit, we're going to grab the punch and punch out our placement guides on both panels. And for the eyelet placement, you want it on the inside of the hem guide and about 1.5 inches up from the bottom. After punching or cutting your hole, grab your eyelets. Feel free to use the size that works best for your project, and grab your hammer die. Once you have everything ready, we're going to flip the right side down. Grab the bottom portion of the die, place your eyelet on the die. It should sit perfectly within the groove. Place the die in your hole from the right side. Slide your eyelet backing tightly over the fabric and hammer it into position. Repeat this process for the opposite hood panel. And then grab both panels, place the right sides together, and stitch the top edge. And before we get started, for this project, we're going to be using a serger. Sergers are great for stretchy knit fabrics. They're going to allow the fabric to stretch and the thread not to break. They also cut and clean up the edges as you're sewing. I highly recommend using a serger for this project, but if you don't have one, it's totally fine. I'm going to show you another method for sewing stretchy knit on your domestic sewing machine. Switch your machine to a zigzag stitch with the higher width and stitch length. And by doing this, it will allow the thread to stretch with the fabric. And either method works great. I just don't want you to feel left out if you don't have a serger. So using the method that works best for you, stitch that top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Cut 1.5 yards of cord, feed it into the eyelet from the right side, pull it up around the top of the panel, and back in through the wrong side. Using the hem guides, we're going to fold the fabric, making a housing for the cord. Once it's even, add a few pins, and we're going to stitch directly on that edge all the way around. I'm using a cover stitch for this step. It's going to cover up that edge on the inside and add a top stitch on the right side. If you don't have this, you can use a serger and a regular straight stitch for a nice, clean, professional look. Next, grab both of your chest pocket panels. Using the pattern, we're going to mark the hem guides on both of the panels. After marking, fold on the guide and pin into position. Again, we're going to be using the cover stitch for this step. Try to make these as neat as possible because they're going to be on the front and center of your jumpsuit. From here, we're going to fold the side and bottom edges a 1/4 inch. Place pins in both sides, and you can set them off to the side for just a moment. Grab your front panel, Using the pocket placement guides, we're going to mark the top and the bottom edge on both panels. And make sure that both of your panels are lined up evenly. Place your pocket panel within the guides, and we're going to flip the pocket panel over that top edge guide. So both panels have right sides together, and we're going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along that top edge. And you can use a regular straight stitch sewing machine. Flip the pocket back into the original position, and we're going to stitch the top, side, and bottom edge. This is more like a top edge stitch, so try to make it very neat because it's going to be noticeable. I'm stitching a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and go ahead and repeat this for the opposite panel. Moving on, grab your 22-inch zipper and your front panel. Using the zipper guides, we're going to place the right sides together on that inside edge. You're going to want to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so feel free to use a zipper foot or a regular presser foot. Make sure you only stitch to the end of the zipper track. Next, we're going to grab our side pocket panels and our front panel. Lay the pattern evenly over the front panel, and we're going to mark the placement of the pocket. Grab one of your side pocket panels, place the right sides together in between the placement points, and stitch as close as you can to that edge. Make sure the pointy narrow side of the pocket is pointing towards the top of the pattern. After stitching, we're going to grab the back panel and do the same thing, but for this one, we're going to line up the side seams and mark the placement from the front panel. This is going to ensure that our pockets are going to line up directly when we sew these side seams together. Place the right sides together and stitch as close as you can to that outside edge. And repeat this process for the opposite front panel and back panel. From here, we're going to grab both of the front panels, place the right sides together, and we're going to stitch that zipper to the opposite front panel. You really want to make sure the necklines are lined up. This will help your panel stay aligned and your zipper centered. So just take your time, and when you're finished, open it up just to double check. Flip the right sides together, and we're going to stitch the remaining portion of that seam at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And do your best to keep the bottom of the pocket aligned as you're sewing. Open it up one more time to make sure all the layers are sewn. Next, we're going to attach the arms, so grab your arm panels. Using the guides on the pattern, it's going to help us to determine the correct sleeve edges. Find the front panel edge, line it up with right sides together on the front panel, and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And it's really important that you line these edges up correctly, or else your neckline is going to turn out backwards and it's not going to fit correctly. Flip the panel open flat, and we're going to repeat this process for the opposite side. Place the right sides together, lining up the sleeve edges, and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch. Grab your back panels, place the right sides together, and we're going to stitch that inside seam at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You also want to make sure that the necklines are lined up. I like to start at the top and work my way down. Keeping the neckline even will make it easier for us to attach the hood later. Lay the back panel out flat, and we're going to start lining up the opposite sleeve ends with right sides together. Make sure you're sewing the correct sleeve to the correct edge, and you can tell this by lining both of the sleeves up, pinning them down, and sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So lining up both of the sleeve edges before you start sewing is the best way to go to prevent sewing the wrong sleeve edges together. You can use a serger or a zigzag stitch. Next, we're going to grab the hood, make sure the right sides are facing out, and we're going to place it on the inside of that neckline, pointing down. Using the seam on the back of the hood and the back panel will help you center the hood. Once you have it centered, pin it into position and stitch all the way around the outside edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I like to start in the center front and work my way all the way around back to that center front. Doing it this way will help keep it aligned, but it's best just to take your time and go slow. After stitching, I like to open it up and make sure it's centered. From here, we're going to do the side seam, so place the right sides together, and we're going to stitch from the sleeve all the way down around the pocket and back down towards the bottom opening, and do the same for the opposite side. This is a very long, tricky stitch that you want to keep making sure everything is aligned as you're sewing. If you are using a serger, it is good to skip the pocket and go past it, and then come back with a straight stitch and stitch around the pocket. Sometimes it can be hard stitching around a pocket with a serger because you cut into your fabric, so just be careful if you're using a serger. From here, we're going to finish up the inside leg seam, so place the right sides together, and we're going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around that edge. And when I'm stitching this area, I like to keep the center seams for both the front and the back panel together as I'm stitching until I stitch through it, and then I can finish out holding the bottom openings together. And again, this helps keep everything aligned so that way both the front and the back panels stay centered. And after this stitch, I highly recommend trying it on, because at this stage, you can fine tune it to your exact measurements. And you can do that by tapering the arm and also tapering the sides. It's a super easy thing to do, and I highly recommend doing it because you can actually take this into other sewing projects and really make your stuff custom fit. And you can use the same technique for the legs. You can either use the inside seam or the side seam to take it into your measurements. And after you got it fine-tuned, we're going to move on to the cuffs. So grab both of your leg and arm cuff panels, fold them in half with the right sides together, and we're going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I recommend using a straight stitch over a serger, but use whatever works best for you. Grab one of the panels, fold it in half with the wrong sides together, and that's going to be your complete cuff panel. And this can be manipulated, so try it on to see if it's the correct fit. You can make it tighter or looser depending on the style or look you're going for. And this is easily done by making it longer or shorter. And it really comes down to personal preference on how you want your cuffs to fit. And you can also change the height by making them taller or shorter. The cuff is going to be smaller than the opening because it cinches the opening closed for a tighter fit. So it's best to try the sleeve on and taper it to your liking. Next, we're going to install the cuffs by placing them on the inside of the opening with right sides together. So again, the cuff is going to be smaller than the opening, so you will have to stretch it as you're sewing. So I like to pick a point and stretch it to that point as I'm sewing and follow all the way through. If you are manipulating the sizes, just make sure that you keep the cuff to opening ratio fairly close, so that way you don't have a big bunchy sleeve or leg opening. And go ahead and repeat this process for the other leg and arm cuff. After sewing the cuffs, flip the right side out, and we're going to finish up the cord. So grab your cord stoppers, pick ones that work best for your style, place them on your cord, trim the cord to your desired length, add knots below the cord stoppers, trim them, and cinch the ends if you're using a nylon base cord. And that's a super simple way to finish your cord ends. Next, we're going to add our zipper pull, so pick the one that works best again for your project. I picked a new one for this project that requires pliers. You open up the end with pliers and you clamp it shut. Very simple, but adds a lot of detail.
And there you have it, your comfy jumpsuit is complete. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. This was a super fun project to make. And like always, if you have any questions about the sewing or the steps, definitely send it my way and I'll try to answer it for you. And the same goes for the things you want to see me make. Definitely send it my way. But until then, I'm going to keep the videos coming at you and I'll see you next time.